Okay, Chairman Ellis, you're live on YouTube.
Alrighty, thank you, LSO, and good morning, members of the Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee. We are trying a new function today for those of you that are watching in the public. If you wanted to participate real time, please visit the Wyoming legislature's website, and you can actually participate if that's the case. But for those of you who have decided to be with us and want to participate, just know that there's a button on the right-hand side of your screen that says raise hand. I know a lot of people want to reserve time to offer public comment, but or just on hand actually, if they wanted to in case, but maybe don't have prepared remarks. If you hit that raise hand button, I'll see you and we'll make sure that we admit you into the meeting. So with that, this morning committee, we're hearing two bills. They both deal with skill-based games in the Wyoming Gaming Commission. But before we jump into those, how about we take roll?
Good morning, members of the committee. Senator Guru.
Here.
Senator Landon.
Here.
Senator Salzar.
Here.
Senator Schuler.
Here.
Chairwoman Ellis.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. And just as another housekeeping measure, I asked Senator Schuler to serve as my vice chair for this session. And so if I need to step away to make another cup of coffee or can't quite be here, Senator Schuler will be helping us run this meeting. During the 2020 interim, the TRW committee worked two bills. There's a longer bill, Senate File 56, which deals with the Wyoming Gaming Commission. And senators will recall that this bill passed during the 2020 regular session or budget session. And so there are some housekeeping items that are included in this bill, but there are also some changes that the interim committee looked at making. So John Brody with LSO is with us today, and he can walk us through the bill. My preference at this time, unless maybe we'll have a discussion kind of offline, I'd rather see us work the longer bill and hold the shorter bill back just in case we need it down the road. So with that, John, could you walk us through these two bills?
Thank you, Chairwoman. John Brody, Legislative Service Office. And you'd like me to start with the shorter bill first or the longer bill?
John, let's go with the shorter bill and then the longer bill.
Okay. Well, so just some maybe overarching themes that are for both of these bills. Each bill contains 5 sections. Your first section is going to be taking the non-codified law from the session law that was the skill-based amusement games regulation, taking that non-codified law and putting it into statute. So that's section 1. Section 2 of the bill is going to be going through current statute and making any necessary conforming changes and other changes as directed by the committee. Section 3 will be the renumbering of what are now the parimutuel wagering provisions that are in statute. And then section 4 repeals the old Wyoming session law. Because we are putting the skill-based amusement game regulations into statute, we no longer will need this session law floating out there and potentially creating conflict or confusion. So we repeal that. And then section 5 is the effective date, which both bills will be effective immediately if they were passed by the legislature. So moving into the first bill, skill-based amusement games continued authorization.
John, just so that the committee's following along, are you going through the proposed substitute bills?
Yes, Madam Chair. I thought that was your preference.
Yes, I just want the committee to be aware, there's Senate File 55 and 56 that were posted online. But John emailed all of you substitute bills, and the purpose of that is to get them from being session laws to actually in the green books, because we are making permanent changes. And so it does make sense to include those in the green books in my view. So he's going through the revised substitutes.
Yeah, thank you, Chairwoman and committee members. Yeah, these two substitute bills that I'll be walking through, really their only purpose is to take what the committee did with the two sponsored bills and to put them in a form where they're going to be available to the public through the green books. This would be done just for a matter of easier public notice and easier access by the general public. So as far as substance is concerned, there's really no difference between these two bills. It's simply just how they look. So, excuse me. Moving to the shorter bill, continued authorization, this legislation really does two things. It gets rid of the sunset date that was on skill-based amusement games of July 1st of this year, and doesn't put that date off or anything. It simply just repeals it and allows for these provisions to work permanently. The second thing that it does is, because it repeals that sunset date, it modifies the payments or the fees that are charged on skill-based amusement game operators and establishments. So rather than just the one-time fee, depending on who you are, if operator, establishment, whatever the case may be, it's now going to be an annual fee, and the fee itself does not change. So moving into the bill itself, beginning on page 1 and then onto page 2, we have a staff comment in there just kind of trying to set the map, or the way that we decided to break this statute up to make it these provisions up, just to make them a little bit more easy to read, a little bit easier to follow. So the Article 1 is going to be 1125 101 through 104, and that's going to be just your general provisions that are currently in law, setting up what the Gaming Commission is.
And John, your audio is breaking up a little bit.
Into Article 2.
Oh, you're breaking in.
And simply renumbering them so that they fit up.
John, this is Affy. Can you
amusement games.
Can you pause and go
And then
back?
the final provision.
Hey, John, I can't hear what you're saying.
Madam Chairman, I'm having some problem.
Yeah, John's face is frozen on my screen, and then I'm not getting any audio. Is that what you all are having? See, John is rejoining, so we'll give him a second, see if his audio improves.
Wow, okay. I don't know what happened there. Everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know when I lost you.
I rewind a significant way. You were just diving into, gosh, where did you leave off? Maybe start from the top. Sorry, John.
No, that's fine. That's the first time that's happened to me, so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So I guess what I was trying to just explain is how we decided to break up the current Title 11 into 3 distinct areas of law. The first being how the Gaming Commission is set up and its kind of run-of-the-mill duties, obligations that you would normally see in statute. Article 2, we're just taking the pari-mutuel wagering. We're not changing it. All we're simply doing is renumbering that under an Article 2. And then we're going to take all the skill-based amusement game provisions and insert them, create them essentially under an Article 3. So there'll be 3 different parts of this chapter now, and it should be fairly easy to follow along, as easy as statute can be. So moving into Section 1, this is all new law. So if you're familiar with Chapter 114 from the session laws of 2020, these provisions are going to look really familiar. We basically just cut and pasted those provisions into this new Article 3 for skill-based amusement games. And then there are some conforming changes that were made just to clean up the language a bit. There were some changes that needed to be made because the session law, would refer to itself when it was authorizing activities and allowing for the effective date of that session law to be, the triggering event for a number of things. And obviously this can't do that. So a bunch of changes in here will speak to provisions that were, in accordance with that old session law and that are continued under this article. So as we go into, and Chairwoman Ellis, I'm not sure how much detail you want me to go into, if you want it more of a kind of high view, or what your preference is.
Yeah, John, because we've got a lot of new committee members on here, I think it'd be good to spend some time to make sure we all understand what's contained in the changes.
Okay, well, I'll go through each section, and if I'm being maybe too thorough, just let me know and I'll try to kind of be more brief. So page 2, line 28, this is basically the provision saying that skill-based, this is the gatekeeping function essentially. What this does is the skill-based amusement games that were authorized in accordance with the session law from the previous budget session, those are the skill games that are authorized to operate under the law as it currently stands. That provision doesn't change. So the sort of gatekeeping, the limitation on the number of games in the state is still in effect. Article B, or excuse me, subsection B. Subsection B basically says that a skill-based amusement game has to meet the requirements under this article as determined by the commission. Pretty much just a formal kind of stamp of approval. Beginning on line 8, this is just the commission's rulemaking authority to promulgate any rules that are necessary. I believe everyone is aware that the Gaming Commission has permanent rules that they're currently working on, so those would go into place, and this just kind of provides the statutory basis for those rules in statute. Going on to line 11, this is the laboratory report. So each operator has to go to a laboratory to make sure that their skill-based game meets the requirements of this provision. The laboratory has to be nationally recognized, and it must be one selected by the Gaming Commission. If it doesn't meet the the laboratory results do not indicate that the skill-based amusement game is in accordance with Wyoming law, then the skill-based amusement game has to be removed by the operator. Moving on to page 3, but then on to page 4, this is going to be your limitations or restrictions on the operations of skill-based amusement games. So you've got limitations on how much money per play. You've got limitations on how much money for an individual payout. Beginning on line 8, you have the limitation of how many skill-based amusement games, may be located within an establishment. And then there's some kind of additional language in that subsection C about it has to be those games that were in the state prior to the effective date of that chapter 114 from session law. Subsection D then talks about the limitations on where skill-based amusement games can be. They have to be limited to areas that are only accessible by those that are 21 years or older. Beginning on line 22 on page 4, and then the majority on page 5. This is the fee structure that has been set up for the operation of skill-based amusement games in the state. Establishments must pay an annual fee of $250. Operators must pay an annual fee of $2,500. And then on line 9, there's an additional $50 essentially registration fee. And the registration is a decal that has to be affixed to each skill-based amusement game, and it costs $50, and that is annual as well. If you go to line 17, this basically just continues the authority of the Gaming Commission to operate the Gaming Commission account, or the Commission Gaming account, as it were. Funds in the account are continuously appropriated to the commission to basically administer this article. And this, that would be the fees that are generated through this provision. Moving on to page 6, line 1. This is going to be the taxes that are collected. So if you all will recall, there was sort of a trigger mechanism in the session law whereby when the Gaming Commission account met $1 million, then the distribution of the taxes changed and more money went to the localities where these skill-based amusement games were being operated. That gaming account has since surpassed $1 million. I believe it's somewhere in the area of 2.5. So what this provision does is it gets rid of that $1 million trigger, since we're far past that, and it just goes straight into the distribution formula. So taxes are collected on a weekly basis, and then the tax rate is at 20%. That 20% is then deposited in the Gaming Commission account and then distributed in accordance with lines 10 through line 18. And you can see the distribution formula there in the bill. Beginning on page 6, line 21, these are the penalties that are in place statutorily for a violation of any of the provisions in this article. It's going to be a misdemeanor, $10,000 or 6 months in prison, or both. And again, this is all from the session law. We haven't, the committee didn't change any of these provisions. Before I go into section 2, are there any questions, or am I going too slow, too fast? Are we doing all right? Or am I doing all right?
Senator Guru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John, the 20%, is that fairly standard? Is that something that, you know, around other states around us, or people that do this similar stuff?
Madam Chairman, Senator Guru, I really can't speak to if this is standard practice for other states that are in this area. I know skill-based amusement games is a pretty new area of gaming regulation, at least from my understandings of discussions that occurred in the committee last session, or excuse me, last interim. I don't know if Director Moore from the Gaming Commission is planning on attending today, but he would probably be in a better position to be able to answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for John at this point, senators? Okay, John, please continue.
Okay, so thank you, Madam Chairman. So moving into section 2, this is just going to be the changes to existing statute that were necessitated as a result of what the committee decided to do last interim. So if you go on to line 20 under definitions, Title 6, this is going to be your criminal provisions. As you know, the way that we set up how lawful gaming happens in the state is that we have a definition of gambling, which is illegal in Title 6. And then what we do is we provide exceptions to what would be considered gambling. So beginning on line 20, there's another there was a catch-all created for the Gaming Commission, and it was going to be activities authorized by the Gaming Commission pursuant to law. The reason we're changing that now is we can be a little bit more specific, since we're not using unpublished or I would say non-codified Wyoming session law. And we're simply just doing a cleanup to say that, you know, the pursuant to law provisions are now under Title 25, Chapter 25 of Wyoming statute. Moving to page 8 on line 1, this is a change to the definition of skill-based amusement game. The reason that this is being done is that the definition in Wyoming session law of skill-based amusement game and that definition as it was created in Title 6 were different. So as you can kind of see here on page 8, we had and really what you need to focus on is, let's see if I can find the provision. So you look on line 5, and it talks about a person's strategy and skill is a factor in determining the outcome. And then if you look at the definition that is now in Article 102, and this will be later in the bill, but it's now the skill and strategy has to be a primary factor. And this was just a recommendation made at in response to the Gaming Commission. They felt the definition in Wyoming session law was a better definition when it came to regulating skill-based amusement games. So as we go through this, there are going to be a couple of, or a number of conforming changes when it comes to the reference of statutes that were in 1125, 105 through I believe 113. And because we're moving all those to a new article, as we go through this, you're going to see 1125, 105, for example, becomes 1125, 201. And that's just simply conforming because we're putting it into the statute. So I won't go into this because this is a lot of just kind of parimutuel stuff that's been law for a very long time. So moving on to page 9. Bottom of page 9. Here we had definitions in the session law, for establishment and operator. We're simply taking those and putting them into the green books. So line 19 and line 22 are just what Wyoming law considers to be an establishment and an operator. As I previously mentioned, we changed skill-based amusement game, the definition in Title VI, and it now references this statute, or excuse me, this definition on page 10, lines 1 through 8. Beginning on line 6, you can see where it talks about these skill and strategy needing to be a primary factor in determining the outcome. The rest of page 10 is just conforming amendments. Page 11, conforming amendments. Page 12, conforming amendments. And then we're basically at the end of the bill. So sections 3, 4, and 5. Section 3 is, as I've mentioned, is just taking all the parimutuel wagering and moving it into a new article. Section 4 is housekeeping. We're now getting rid of the Wyoming session law because of how this bill puts everything into the green books. And then section 5 is an effective immediately date. The committee, my understanding was the committee wanted as much notice to the operators and establishments that the law would still allow for their activities to continue. So they wanted the bill to be as swift as possible. Madam Chairman, that is the substitute bill for, I work under LSO number for 204, but Senate File 55.
Alrighty, committee, do you have any questions? Are there any questions for John? Senator Landon.
Madam Chairman, thank you. And John, just for clarification, just the passage of this bill alone would effectively remove the sunset that we put on a year or two ago. Isn't that correct?
Madam Chairman, Senator Landon, you are correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, just since this is a new committee, I will say that the committee did debate whether or not it was more appropriate to push off the sunset date for 5 years, for example, or just to get rid of it entirely. And after discussion of the issue, obviously the determination was to get rid of the repeal date entirely.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Brody? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, John. We will now open this up for public comment, and I'm looking at my participant screen here and trying to see if anyone is raising their hand and would like to make some remarks. For those watching, we've got a few people who are joining the meeting, so just please be patient. We're letting and admitting those folks right now. And Rihanna and Amanda, when you're done admitting folks, let me know, and then we'll start tackling the list.
Chairwoman Ellis, at this point, we've admitted everyone into the meeting.
Okay.
Raise their hand.
Sounds good. And then I do see Charles Moore, who is currently the director of the commission. Mr. Moore, would you care to address the committee and offer some remarks on the draft bill? And you're muted.
Thank you very much, committee members. Chairman, if you don't mind, I would like to respond to Senator Rue's question. Wyoming, as you know, has the 20% tax rate. Arkansas has a 18% tax rate, and Virginia has a little bit different taxation. It's a $1,200 per terminal per month tax rate. And I did also send that in an email to the senator so he can share that with the rest of the committee. Moving on, if you don't mind, Chairman, just as far as the substitute bill, in reading it and going through it, you know, I think it's a very workable bill. I think it has all the pieces that we need to do our job. And I appreciate all the hard work that everyone has put into this. So thank you very much. That's all the comments I have.
Okay. Any questions for the director? Seeing none, I do have a question. I spent some time reading the lengthier bill, Senate File 56, and on the manufacturers, I do have a little bit of concern about looping them in. And I'm just trying to think of analogies in other industries. And obviously like the coal mining industry comes to mind when the state of Wyoming is regulating an entity. You know, if something bad happens at the coal mine, we go after who the permit holder is. And usually that doesn't include the manufacturer. If there's something wrong with the product, it's between the operator and whoever the manufacturer is. It's some private action. And so I'm really uncomfortable kind of with looping in the manufacturer in this bill. Can you tell me if other states have largely regulate manufacturers of these games?
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I forgot to identify myself earlier. Charles Moore, Director of the Wyoming Gaming Commission. And again, thank you. You know, in other states, and again, the gaming world is a very highly regulated world, and so is the horse racing world. In what we do license the manufacturers as well, because they do have a responsible piece in this. I think part of the reason we went with licensing, and this was not initially my suggestion. I think this was a committee suggestion to add that in, as I recall, but was part of the problem with the laboratory reports. We ran into a situation early on to where the operators were required to submit the laboratory reports. Well, they were unable to get those or couldn't get them within the prescribed period of time from the manufacturers. And we ended up having some situations to where the laboratory report didn't get to us in time, so we were unable to consider it and therefore unable to consider that location. So I think that is kind of how that expanded into licensing of the manufacturers. You know, I'm not exactly sure where we came up with the $10,000 licensing. I believe that is what it is in the bill, and also the $5,000 renewal. Again, I think those were submissions from one of the committee members, as I recall. In other states, I think it is very consistent across, you know, most all jurisdictions that the manufacturers, or at least the vendors who are providing the games, are being licensed. So we have a little bit of a regulatory oversight over that whole piece. I don't know if I've answered your question, Madam Chairman, but I hope so.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Just to kind of continue on this point, I think I'm trying to understand if the difficulty in getting the lab reports submitted was because we stood up the commission really quickly. Mm-hmm. And I think people are playing catch up. I'm just wondering if that's necessary going forward as we start getting clear regulations, as operators start understanding what their obligations are, that they reach out to their manufacturers in advance. And so some of those delays get smoothed out over time. I'm just trying to think of a scenario where we do this in any other context where we're having such a long, it's the long arm of the law. You know, how far does Wyoming's ability to regulate reach? And so when I think of manufacturers in other states, I think it's a bit of a stretch for us. And so I'm wondering, do you think that with more time, some of those issues about delay in getting the lab report submitted will smooth out?
Chairman Ellis, yes, I do think so. Absolutely. I think the direction you're going is an absolutely a correct way to probably go with this. I think with more time, with better overall regulation, I think we can alleviate it, if not totally eliminate the issue of the gaming report. So yes, I do agree with you.
So Mr. Moore, just so you're aware, I'm thinking about running an amendment to delete some of the regulation over manufacturers at this point in time and letting the commission develop. And if we see this continues to be a problem in the future, maybe exploring other options. But at this point, I can't think of any other scenario where we hold manufacturers liable for products that operators bring into our state. So I just want to make you aware of that. I think I saw Senator had her hand up and then Senator Landon. And Wendy, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Madam Chair. It was just kind of a follow-up with the labs. Actually, when I was reading through the bills, I was, very curious about where these independent labs exist. And again, hearing that we may have some issues with getting reports in a timely manner. Could you maybe Director Moore give some information on those and maybe a little more background for those of us that are new? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Chairman Ellis, Senator Schuler, again, thank you. As far as the timing of getting the reports, we had the 60-day window that I think everybody is probably fairly aware of that window. So nationally recognized laboratories in the United States, I can list off 4 or 5 laboratories out there. And of course, as we all know, when the governor signed the bill and everybody started moving forward, it was March 17th. Well, again, most of these laboratories were all of a sudden forced to be at home. People were working from home, they didn't have the access. So that created a lot of that timing dilemma that we did run into, I think. Everybody was scrambling to find the laboratories that had had previous experience with testing these particular games and the skill-based amusement games. So, that again, and that just compounded it as well. Did that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Okay, Senator Landon.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Just to pick up where your questions left off, and I really appreciated, the discussion about regulation. But I guess, Director Moore, being a newcomer to the committee as well, I wonder if you could give any comments with regard to where you think we are. Really appreciate the work of the Gaming Commission and how quickly we've stood this thing up. And, there were some bumps along the road. Are these bills adequate to get us where we need to go at this point? One of the concerns we had, you and I visited a few months ago about certain levels that would maybe take somebody out of the ability to have a skill-based game in their property, for example. Are we good to go, and are we ready to codify this set of laws? Give us the 30,000-foot view for a second, if you could.
Chairman Ellis, Senator Landon, thank you. Thank God we're looking at the 30,000-foot view of it, because if you look real close, you will see some of the mistakes and the hiccups along the way. So thank you for that part of it. I think Mr. Brody explained that in the bill that this doesn't necessarily allow for the substitute bill does not allow for additional locations. At least I don't believe it does. It does allow for upgrades of software, upgrades to the systems that are currently in place. Does the substitute bill give us the tools in our toolbox to do the job? Yes, it does. And I'm very pleased. We've worked hard on this and working with the committee, Mr. Brody, and everyone here to have enough tools to where we can hopefully keep this on the ground, so to speak. Further than that, time will tell. I think how this is rolling out, it is fairly quickly in anything of this magnitude. And one of the things to get an idea of what we are looking at, I would recommend, or I can email it to you, the link. There is a mapping tool that we have. It's on our website. It is in the gaming report that we did. And I could share it with you right now as well. That would show you the locations in the state, show you where everything is. And so you do really, truly get that 30,000-foot view of that. And I can either furnish that to you, the link in an email here shortly, or I can share my screen, I would imagine, with you and do that.
So, Madam Chair, a follow-up real quickly. Director Moore, thank you for those comments. Really appreciate it. As I read these bills, I wondered if there would come a time where where we would want some sort of a breakdown in sizes of businesses that might be willing or able to host one of these machines or whatever. Do you see a time where we would want to break that down? You mentioned, you know, the level of licensure is, you know, that bar is pretty high for somebody to just have one machine, for example. Do you see us working on that in the future, or you think we're good to go for a while?
Director Moore?
Thank you, Chairman Ellis. Senator Landon, you know, I think we are good to go for the time being. You know, as technology blazes forward, you know, you do run into unintended consequences on this. You know, I believe that the definition is a good definition that we have there that will encompass a variety of types of games without going, you know, across the line, so to speak. So I do think it is a good situation, what we've got here with this bill.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the director? Seeing done, Director Moore, thank you for being with us this morning. If you don't mind just kind of being on hand in case a question arises.
Yes.
That would be
Thank you.
In looking at the participants on the Zoom, if you would like to speak, please click on the button that said raise hand, and I will happily call on you. I see Jonathan Downing raising his hand. So Jonathan, welcome to the committee, and are you able to unmute? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ellis. Good morning. I am Jonathan Downing with Cowboy Skill and Pace-O-Matic of Wyoming. Catherine Wilkinson is also on this morning and has some comments following me if that will work okay. And thank you for the opportunity to testify. We are supportive of both Senate File 55 and Senate File 56 and would ask for your support. Completely understand Chairwoman Ellis on the wanting to go into 56 and agree on having 55 as a backstop in case something gets changed with the other. Before I get started with our comments, had a text message from Mike Mosier with the Wyoming State Liquor Association early this morning. He asked me to provide comments of support from their association for both bills. His mother-in-law had passed away this morning, and so he's not able to join us. Going into our testimony, would like to emphasize the passage of this legislation is critical to stabilizing the regulatory environment for Wyoming small businesses. Our games are in bars, taverns, restaurants, and fraternal organizations which operate skill games. If this legislation is not passed, then skill-based amusement games would not be able to operate in Wyoming after July 1, 2021. I would like to take a moment to thank Director Moore, the Gaming Commission staff, and the Gaming Commission for being able to stand up this program in such a rapid time after the legislature passed it this last year. And the speed at which they were able to do it in an effective manner, as well as consulting with people impacted by the regulation and the new law, was very impressive when you look at what else was going on in the world at that time. And so on our behalf, we thank Director Moore and his team. There were some discussions earlier as far as testimony and discussion within the committee regarding manufacturers. We are amenable to going with more of the operator language. And with respect to the question on the labs that had just come up earlier, now that this program has stood up, I don't foresee that the lab issues would be as much of a problem, primarily because the Gaming Commission does have a lot more processes in place. Cowboy Skills are a partnership of 8 operators across Wyoming, all providing Pace-O-Matic skill games. Our operators also provide traditional vending entertainment such as pool and dart leagues, coin-op entertainment, and ATMs. Skill games have provided an economic lifeline to Wyoming bars, restaurants, American Legions, VFWs, and other fraternal organizations by providing another much needed stream of revenue during these very challenging times. And those revenues have allowed these organizations to pay their bills, keep their workers employed, and stay open for business. There are currently 836 licensed skill games across 306 locations in Wyoming. Cowboy Skill operators have 611 games in 232 locations. For the long term, again, we appreciate the desire to have a predictable, stable, and regulatory environment. And as far as the tax revenues that have been collected so far, since May of 2020, $1.9 million in taxes and fees have been paid to the state of Wyoming on behalf of Cowboy Skill Games. There is some discussion about prepaying taxes in the Substitute 56. And if we were allowed to prepay those taxes as proposed, that number would actually be $2.2 million from May 2020 to January 10th, 2021. Madam Chair, if it would please you, I'd turn it over to Catherine Wilkinson for some additional comments.
Before we go to Ms. Wilkinson, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Downing? Seeing none, Ms. Wilkinson.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Catherine Wilkinson, representing Cowboy Skill Games powered by Pace-O-Matic. Thank you, Madam Chairman. My testimony will be short. I just wanted to add that we do appreciate the committee's time, and skill we do believe needs to be further defined. So many games do look similar on the outside, but we do want a closer look than 30,000 feet because they look similar on the outside, but it's really what's in the inner workings that certify whether or not they are skill. And clearly defining keeps them in those locations in which they belong. And we do believe that different games belong in different establishments. So the difference with skill is a player can win every single time that they push play. The person is in control, not the machine. And so this involves memory retention, pattern recognition, hand-eye dexterity, and a timed execution. And so a patient, skillful player can win every time. Madam Chairman, I would also be available for details on specifics as you're working the bill, if you like. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Wilkinson? Okay, seeing none, feel free to stay on hand in case we have some questions down the road. I see Mr. Agopian has raised his hand, and then Ms. Little from Wyoming, I believe the County Commissioners Association. We'll go to you next, but first we'll start with Mr. Agopian. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. My name is Nick Agopian. I represent Bankshot LLC. Bankshot was previously represented by another lobbyist in 2020. And so they've been a participant with this discussion. But today, as you look at both Senate File 55 and 56, we want to offer our support. And the message we really want to deliver is one of urgency, that we want to make sure, excuse me, that our business can stay in business on July 1. That's our utmost priority. I heard, Madam Chairwoman, heard your comments about your intent for the committee, and Bankshot can certainly get on board with working 56 and moving it forward if that's where the committee's going. It is the urgency and the repeal of the sunset so we can stay in business on July 1. For Bankshot, what that means, we're a company that's operated in Wyoming since 2017, operating across 12 counties with 174 machines. In 2020, from May when they first began remitting taxes through, I believe, December 27th was the final 2020 payment, they remitted nearly $400,000 in taxes. In my mind, that puts us on a trajectory for 2021 in that $500,000 range. And that's what I want to identify as the risk of not repealing the sunset for Bankshot and for the state. With that, I would stand I guess I had one more comment, and I'll be around for 56, but I certainly have not provided the detail and am new enough to the industry that I don't know that I have the experience, but we certainly support Charlie and what Director Moore and what the commission is doing. And we believe firmly in strong regulations. And to be specific, believing that strong regulations builds confidence in the marketplace with the general public. And with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Agopian. Questions from the committee? Mr. Gopian, I made some comments earlier about the manufacturers. I know you said you're new to this issue somewhat, but do you know if your client would have any heartburn over removing some of the regulation over manufacturers at this time?
I would need to ask more specifically, but I don't see anything offhand. We're comfortable with the direction where the committee is going overall, and their understanding of the issue.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to Ms. Little from the County Commissioners Association. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. My name is Kelly Little with the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I'm here today to let you know that the Wyoming County Commissioners Association has taken a position of support on both Senate File 55 and Senate File 56, particularly in support of repealing the sunset. The county commissioners appreciate tools in the toolbox to generate revenue at the local level, and that's what this does for them. It's just a tool to generate revenue for the local communities, and so the commissioners are in support of that. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take those. Otherwise, that is all I have to share.
Ms. Little, do you have a list of which counties receive the most revenue from the skill-based games and which don't receive hardly any or any at all?
I don't have that right offhand, Chairwoman Ellis, but I would be happy to get that information and provide it to the committee.
Thank you, Kelly. Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alrighty, I see Jordan Dresser and Byron Odakovan both have their hands up. We'll go with Mr. Dresser first and then Mr. Odakovan. And I believe Mr. Dresser is the incoming chairman of the Northern Arapahoe Council. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Chairwoman Ellis and members of the committee. My name is Jordan Dresser, and I have the honor of serving as chairman of the Northern Arapahoe Business Council, which is the governmental body of the Northern Arapahoe tribe. I would like to thank the members of the committee for allowing me to provide comments on behalf of the Northern Arapahoe tribe regarding Senate File 0056, Wyoming Gaming Commission, modifications and corrections. Under the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act of 1987, the Northern Arapahoe tribe currently owns and operates the Wendover Hotel and Casino, which is in Riverton, and the 789 Smoke Shop and Casino and the Little Wing Casino in Ethatee. The Northern Arapahoe tribe is fully committed to ensuring its economic drivers, the gaming establishments, are operated and regulated responsibly. And that's something that we take great pride in. Gaming has been beneficial to the tribe and the residents of the surrounding communities. Revenues generated from the tribe's gaming facilities are closely regulated to directly fund governmental programs for tribal members. Importantly, unlike out-of-state operations, tribal gaming revenues support local economies by establishing schools, funding social service programs, and expanding local businesses, which we all know right now is a big thing, especially with COVID. By its nature, gaming must be a highly regulated industry. As expert regulators of our own gaming establishments, the tribe is intimately aware of the importance of robust regulations for maintaining the integrity of gaming operations. Gaming regulation needs to evolve rapidly, as advancing technology can change the industry through new styles of gaming being manufactured and making new tools available to regulators. Because of these shifts, regulatory practices and definitions that are made when first adopted can quickly become irrelevant, obsolete. This is why the ability to establish new regulations and technical standards should remain with the Wyoming Gaming Commission. Once woven in statute, definitions and regulations become increasingly difficult to change, and the lack of ability to integrate and regulate new technology can have long-standing negative impacts on the industry. Even words as simply as may versus shall can hinder the ability of a regulatory agency to carry out their fundamental duties. It is essential regulation be evaluated consistently to ensure that they are now outdated or incorporating an unnecessary burden on the regulators or operators in the industry. Outdated or rigid regulation may result in costly and wasted resources through misguided enforcement. To be clear, we fully support any efforts to give the Gaming Commission the authority and flexibility it needs to regulate gaming. However, after reviewing SF0056, we have concluded this bill may inadvertently tie the hands of the Gaming Commission by limiting the Commission's ability to promulgate and adopt definitions and regulations at the speed of technology and ever-revolving gaming industry. Additionally, Senate File 0056 eliminates the existing June 30th, 2021 sunset date for skill games and makes these games a permanent fixture in Wyoming. The Arapahoe Business Council opposes this permanent expansion of gaming and supports the original date. However, if the committee's ultimate desire is to grant additional time for skill games, a sunset date of June 30th, 2023 may be considered. The Arapahoe Tribe supports a strong gaming commission and their inherent ability to promulgate regulation and standards. The Gaming Commission's role to stay on the forefront of the ever-evolving industry and are Wyoming's expert in the field. Through the commission, the state can continue to protect the stakeholders and ensure public confidence through efficient and effective regulation. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of Northern Arapahoe Business Council. And I want to thank you all. You all are, I admire every single one of you for doing this Zoom, especially doing this during this time, you know, and I appreciate you all. So thank you all for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Questions for Chairman Dresser? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And for Mr. Dresser, just wondering, you mentioned you think that there's something in the bill that will possibly limit the Gaming Commission in some way. Could you elaborate on that just a little bit? Thank you.
Chairman Dresser.
We were talking about, you know, especially in terms of the language and whatnot, you know, with the statute and how certain wordplay can kind of limit the tribe. For example, may versus shall, you know, like I think you have a gaming commission that's going to basically enforce different things. So like with us, you know, our gaming commission is very hands-on with everything. So I think when you incorporate all of them, it'll kind of help everybody find wording and things that protect all the stakeholders.
Any further questions for Chairman Dresser? I have one, just kind of thinking about, you know, we've got a lot of catch up to do. And as you know, gaming is a very technical, because some games look and feel like a slot machine, but the internal mechanics, they're not. And it depends on what's happening inside. And maybe if you could, I don't know if you have this information, but you know, what were some of the things that Northern Arapahoe experienced when they were getting up to speed and starting their own you know, gaming regulatory office and just getting your membership up to speed on some of those technicalities and training? If you could shed any light on that, because I do have some concerns that we need to grow our expertise quickly on this commission with our commissioners and trying to figure out the best way of doing that. So if you have any insight in that, I'd appreciate knowing.
Well, you said a very key word, which is that about the appearance of how they look and whatnot. You know, if you think about it, you go back to the history of the Northern Arapahoe tribe. It first started off with pull tabs in a sense, and then it quickly evolved after that, you know, and then we were able to get Class 3 gaming, which if from a machine standpoint, if you look at it, you know, the Class 2, Class 3 look very similar, you know, so it's just, but like you said, it's the mechanics of what's going on inside and what's allowable. So to me, it's just like, I think with the regulatory aspect of all of that stuff, it's just being able to know what's going on and being able to see what's the player seeing, because, you know, looks can be deceiving in that aspect. So I think when somebody sees something like that, they think the gaming is like that across the board. And it's like teaching people what it means between, you know, Class 2, Class 3 gaming and whatnot in that aspects. And it's really educating people. And it's getting people knowing what's inside there and what's with that. Because then if you think about it, these different the thing with we always say Vegas style, like that was just kind of like the wording that we'd always use for the Class 3. So I think that's just something to think about in the future, because, you know, when you see these different things, when I drive through Wyoming and I see the different things in these different places, you know, I automatically kind of know what they are in an aspect because I come from this end. But you have somebody who's just a regular resident can see it and be like, oh, it's a Vegas style game, you know? So it's just kind of educating people about that aspect.
And just to follow up, Mr. Chairman, are you aware, are there regular conferences in kind of the gaming world that gaming regulators can attend, commission members to just get up to speed on some of those distinctions and become experts in what games are offered and available. I know that they're out there for Indian gaming, but I don't know about just regular skill-based gaming. So do you have any thoughts on what resources are out there, conferences, so we can get our commissioners up to speed?
G2E always has different conferences, and they're one of the largest providers of the games. You know, I don't know what they're doing right now in terms of the gaming, like what their conferences with COVID, but they're a big resource. So I think they're ones that would really get everybody up to speed about what it means between class 2, class 3, and all these different things.
Thank you. Any further questions for Chairman Dresser? Chairman Dresser, thanks for being with us today. And
Thank you.
Our appreciation for Ms. Wildcat, who serves on the commission. I think from what I understand, she's providing a lot of good information. We have Mr.
Yes, she is. Thank you.
And then Mr. Moore back with us. So we'll hear from Mr. Odakovan first.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Byron Odakovan, the Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. Let me cover a couple of things quickly and then offer a couple of comments. And from the Sheriffs and Chiefs perspective, we recognize that it's legislative prerogative on whether to have gaming in Wyoming and to what extent. Thus, the Wyoming statute structure says gambling is illegal except, and the exceptions are what the legislature authorizes. So we understand that. Our role as we look at this is to think about it from the perspective of what if there's a problem? What if there's an unscrupulous operator? Who is called upon to then deal with, investigate, and ultimately prosecute that unscrupulous operator to protect all of those that you've authorized that are operating within the framework of the statute. So bear in mind that that's kind of where we're coming from with our comments. And as we've wrestled with this issue through the interim and through the legislative session, we wrestled with the idea that we need to have a nimble gaming commission able to process rules relatively quickly as folks who decide that there's an opportunity come to Wyoming to operate machines that may or may not fit within the statutory framework of what you anticipate in terms of that percentage of payout or that percentage of return or that contractual arrangement that the statute contemplates. So thus we have some of that review by the forensics, because as we've already kind of identified, the machines look very similar from the outside. It's the internal workings. It's that computer board. It's that feature and function that makes it either a slot machine or a skill game, if you will, in abstract terms. And it's that ability to take that machine either from the manufacturer's standpoint, or if it's not from the manufacturer's standpoint, basically off the street, and send it to that lab to determine whether or not it's operating within the statutory framework. So there's value, I think, in having that manufacturer involved in that testing and review, rather than to walk into an establishment and say, well, we can't tell if that machine is operating within the statute. There isn't a mechanism for that. So we'll remove that, test it, and do. That's a very expensive undertaking to happen. So I would suggest that we leave some of that discretion of doing that testing for conformity to statute to the Gaming Commission to sort out by regulation, so that they have the ability to be nimble with the ever-changing world of Class 2 gaming. Recognizing that many of the question was other states. A number of other states view these type of machines as a nemesis to the gaming world. So they view these machines in a different light, and they're testing to see if the machines are in fact one of these machines, which would then be illegal in their state versus legal. So Wyoming's taken the tack that you've decided that the premium gambling opportunity in Wyoming is a skill-based game. So it's paramount that we make sure that it operates within that legal framework that's defined in the statute. The definition in statute becomes critical and important. And I wish I could say with certainty that the definition covers what it needs to cover, because the laboratory analysis that's conducted on the machine is against the definition. It's not against the machine itself. It's whether or not the machine operates within the definition described by statute. So when we're changing the definition, we need to be mindful and careful, and it takes time to analyze the definition. Are we allowing more games by modification of the definition? Or are we reining in the games to make sure that unscrupulous operators don't look at this as an opportunity to come and fleece our citizens out of their hard-earned discretionary money? So it becomes a game of cat and mouse with some of the unscrupulous operators trying to sort out whether or not they're acting in a criminal nature versus the ones who are providing a service, if you will, within the framework of the statute and within the regulations of the Gaming Commission. So I would, as we move forward with either 55 or 56, bear in mind that there'll be some ever changing as we go forward, educate you on part of the process, take time to understand part of the nuances to the changes to the statutes so that we can respond appropriately, both in terms of our testimony as well as suggestions for the commission in terms of regulation. So Madam Chair, with that, I think I'll pause.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Odakovan? Senator Guru.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Odakovan, I have a question, and I don't know if you can answer this, maybe Mr. Moore can answer this. And we've been talking a little bit about regulating the manufacturer, and I know it's going to come up later and it's possible so in some amendments. So I just wanted to ask, in general, we like to regulate a little less when it comes to some of these things, and it's less regulation is always good. That's what I've been told. But in this particular case, could it be that actually having regulating the manufacturer might not be a bad thing and I'll just give you a scenario where the manufacturers may want to have that control so they can have their machines closed. So if I buy a machine, I can't open the machine as the sole owner now that manufacturer's out of it, and then maybe do a little mischief as far as how those boards pay out and how those are, and that might be a case where we want to keep the manufacturers involved. Is that a scenario that you guys game out? Is that when you were speaking earlier, is that something you guys are talking about?
Mr. Odakovan?
Madam Chair, thank you. And I appreciate the manner we asked the question from the standpoint of how you described it. And the answer would be yes. There's nothing to say because the machine has to be opened, if you will, to retrieve the interest of the game. What was the payout? How did all of this work? So that to retrieve that data for tax purposes or report purposes, et cetera. That same opportunity then lies for, as you described, a little mischief could be afoot. And if the manufacturer has the ability to pass the machine, if you will, the commission has the ability to assure that that's in fact true, and then that machine goes out, then there's some assurances that mischief would not be there as an opportunity for some unscrupulous folks to do. And we could hearken back to the days of pull tabs and have a great discussion of pulling the winning tickets out of the pull tab deck or shoe, I guess as it's referred. So for those in the bar industry, recognize that with a degree of smile that, yes, understand. So yes, I think anything we can do to keep the unscrupulous folks at bay and keep our reputable operators operating, if it's your desire, would be something the Gaming Commission, I think, would welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Mr.
Any other questions for Mr. Odakovan? Mr. Odakovan, I want to just kind of jump into this. So I'm looking at the original Senate File 56, and so that's not the substitute. But what gave me some pause was the taxes that we're imposing. We say we're going to charge 20%. And if there's a default on those taxes right now, the way the proposed language is worded, state of Wyoming could go after either the operator or the manufacturer. And so I think that's where I'm having some heartburn over the reach of Wyoming is if there's a default in the taxes, usually you have one person that you've permitted and you go after them for being in default. But when we have this or, it creates confusion over who really is in charge of paying that tax. And so when I say that, I mean, that's the question I have is, do you see that maybe that's a little confusing when you have maybe two people held accountable? Wyoming then has to figure out who is defaulting on the taxes rather than just going to the operator, who in other circumstances, in other industries, there's just one entity where you collect on a default.
Madam Chair, thank you. Let me stab part of that, if my answering machine doesn't make too much noise, and pass the ball on to Director Moore as well. So I think this is somewhat unique in that the manufacturer is looking at Wyoming statute, and the manufacturer is then setting those parameters and establishing that report. And then the machine goes to an operator, if you will, mom and pop downtown, you pick it establishment, who's exercising a degree of full faith and confidence that the machine is doing as it was purported to do, and that the report that it generates is correct. So the reverse question becomes, what if it's not? So is mom and pop liable for turning in a false report when they had no idea it was false? Or is the manufacturer who set up the false report somehow liable? So I think Director Moore and the commission may have some thoughts on how best to remedy the situation where the report at hand does not reflect the intent of the statute.
So maybe Mr. Odakovan, be clear, you and I are talking about two separate things. I'm talking about what happens if there's a default on taxes versus whether or not there's a problem with the machine. And so my question is, these operators are bringing these machines into Wyoming. So they do have a responsibility to ensure that they feel like they comply with our laws. And to the extent that the manufacturer is providing false information, I feel like there's always that right of action for the operator to bring a suit elsewhere saying, these guys sold me bad products or their reports are faulty. Here's where we were stuck with a fine, or I feel like there's an action there. But at the end of the day, it's the operator who's choosing to bring those machines into Wyoming.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I misunderstood the question and answered. You are correct. I answered the one half of it without answering the second half, and would defer to Director Moore.
Okay, Director Moore.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I think by removing the manufacturer's language would be fine. I think if we found out later, we have the authority to go ahead and have a license requirement in there of some sort, to where if we did feel like there was a need, we would have recourse if that came up. So, I think that we would be fine taking the manufacturer side out of it, as you had suggested and you discussed. Also, if you don't mind, I'd just like to let the committee know that we spend a tremendous amount of time working with several groups, learning more on gaming. The landscape of gaming is changing every day. I mean, you turn on your cell phone and things are rebooted and there's new technology. We have 4 different consulting contracts with different groups around the United States that consult on a daily basis with us, from laboratories that we're dealing with every day, and looking at the rules and the regulations and their suggestions to former gaming retirees that have spent the last 25, 30 years as directors of gaming commissions who have gone through that. And a lot of this is through my connections with the Association of Racing Commissioners International. While separate, majority of the people that are on those boards are also part of the gaming world. Until recently, of course, our commissioners have attended different forums, again, G2E, different things like that, but they're also now having online platforms. We send out those notifications to the commissioners continually, but one of the things that I do find is a shortcoming here is getting additional staffing. I know that's a very difficult situation in the landscape we're in right now, but we are self-funded. I do have a proposal that has been submitted for additional staffing to help us. And it's the gaming or whatever industry you're in of this magnitude does require a tremendous amount of attention. And I'm very sensitive to that, Chairwoman. And I appreciate your sensitivity to it as well, and everyone on this committee. We have to stay laser focused. We have to stay on the cutting edge of it. And we're doing everything within our confines of the agency right now to keep up to speed. We have gaming terminals in the offices here that we spend a tremendous amount of time, not just playing, but getting to where we're learning how to eat, sleep, and drink with them, so to speak. And then spending a tremendous amount of time with one of the independent laboratories that are out there and having them explain it to us. So it's kind of an interesting scenario for us. We work with horses to electronics, and so it is a broad expanse. And then we're working with the law enforcement side of it to something that everybody seems to be focusing on in the regulatory world. This is the nature of in a regulatory business, is you spend 95% of your time focusing on a 5%er, the bad guy. Well, what we forget is there are a lot of really good people out there that you can work with, you can glean information from. But it is our responsibility to protect the wagering public and to speak to our new mission statement. You know, it speaks exactly to that we put in place this year. A lot of the things that you are concerned about, you know, the safety and welfare of all lawful gaming in the state, to our vision statement that we came up with. The commission worked very hard on this, to foster an environment of operating in a fair and diligent manner. And we'll also be responsive and proactive and known for our expertise. So those are the goals that the commission does have, and moving forward. And I stand for any additional questions. Thank you for the time.
Any questions, Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this could either be for this question for Director Moore or Mr. Odakovan. Following up on the idea of bad actors, I'm wondering if our penalties that are in this bill, do you feel like they're appropriate, and or do we need to take a look at those as well? They seemed appropriate to me, but I just wondered if either of you gentlemen had an idea on that. Thank you.
Mr. Moore, Mr. Odakovan, Mr. Moore.
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman Ellis, Senator Schuler. You know, we have two pieces here. We have the administrative action, and we have the administrative side of that, which is substantial. But then also we have the criminal side. So we're kind of balancing between two sides of that house. And some of the bill does even address that a little bit. It's giving us authority on one side, which is for the administrative piece of it in the administrative actions, but then also too, we have two law enforcement officers that are fully empowered law enforcement officers in the state of Wyoming. So, you know, they have their action. So to answer your question, I do think we're good at this point. Yes.
Any other additional questions? Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it. Alrighty, looking at the participant list, is there anyone from the public who would like to testify? There's a small button that said raise hand in the participant screen. If anyone would like to raise their hand to testify, please click that button now and we'll call on you. Mr. Odakovan, are you speaking? Nope. Okay. I don't see any other questions. Ella, so I just want to make sure that I'm correct, that no one else is trying to enter.
Chairwoman Ellis, you are correct. There is nobody else asking to testify at this moment.
Okay. So committee, with that, we've closed public comment. It is 9:45-ish. As I've indicated to the committee, I think that because this is a very permanent change to the parimutuel commission, that we should be including this in the green books. So, I would entertain a motion to either adopt the substitute bill for Senate File 55 or 56. Oh, Mr. Brody from LSO.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to confirm, did the committee want me to go through Senate File 56 substitute, or do you think it's been adequately addressed?
Committee members, do you want to go over Senate File 56? There are some additional changes. Senator Landon?
Madam Chairman, I think you were headed exactly where I was going to go. So go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think, or excuse me, Senator Landon, Mr. Brody, if you don't mind just giving us a quick overview of the substitute for 56, that would be great.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll try to go as fast as I can without just glossing over everything. Some things
Along with my committee members, if you want him to slow down or have a question as we go, we can do that too. So just please raise your hand and get my attention, and we'll if there's a part that you're unclear on, let's get it cleared up sooner rather than later.
So thank you, Madam Chairman. John Brody, Legislative Service Office. I'm going to go over the proposed substitute for Senate File 56. As I mentioned earlier, this just takes all the provisions, in addition to some of the amendments. This bill is a little bit more robust in that sense, and puts them into Wyoming statute. So the structure is going to be all the same. Couple things to note at the outset is, as we go through the bill, you're going to notice that this idea of regulating manufacturers has now been introduced to this approach of regulation. So they're going to, manufacturers are going to play a fairly significant role, I guess, in being regulated by the Gaming Commission. So as we go into the bill, and I'll try to just go as quick as I can without going too quick here. So page 3, line 17. This is similar to the other bill, the rulemaking authority of the commission. And actually, let me stop just for one point. The reason there are two bills is that one of these bills was the changes and modifications that were at the request of the Gaming Commission, which is Senate File 56. The earlier bill that I went over was a simple repeal bill. So this is the bill that has a lot of recommended changes that were brought forward by the commission to address some of the issues that they've dealt with over the past number of months. The first being in this subsection C. So they asked for a little bit more authority or a little bit more clarity on the authority they have when it comes to rulemaking. So there's additional language talking about how the rule provisions can include provisions for the control, supervision, direction of manufacturers, operators, and establishments. One thing to note here is that nowhere else in the bill does it set the parameters for the fines that the commission can put in place on a manufacturer, operator, or establishment. So it may be advisable for the committee to kind of set the sideboards on what an appropriate fee would be when it comes to a violation of the administrative rules promulgated in accordance with this act. Moving to page 4, beginning on line 2, the change here is that now the manufacturer is going to be responsible for submitting the report showing the game is in accordance with Wyoming law. Another thing to note about this provision is that it's a bit of a housekeeping change, but it makes clear that the report itself does not dictate whether or not a person is, or an operator, a game, is approved for operation in the state. The report is submitted to the commission. The commission makes a determination based on that report on whether to approve the game. So there's a bit of a clarification in that subsection A on that point. Subsection B, this was not brought at the recommendation of the commission. This was an amendment that was adopted during the last meeting of the last interim committee. This basically just speaks to additional factors that have to come into play when it comes to software function and software updates, when it comes to skill-based amusement games and the reports that are generated on those games. And that goes on to all of page 5, basically. Going on to page 6, nothing has really changed on that, so we can continue on. This is similar to the last bill. So beginning on page 6 on line 18, this is kind of the fee structures. All the fees are now going to be annual. We don't change any of the amounts. But on page 7, line 5, we loop in manufacturers which weren't regulated or required to pay a fee under the current law. So they are required to pay the commission an initial fee of $10,000 and an annual renewal fee of $5,000. And that would be to permit them to conduct business in the state. Subsection D was not changed, at least with respect to the other bill or the bill that this would be substituting for. Subsection E just makes it clear that all of the annual fees that are going to be due to the commission have to be paid on or before July 1st of each year. Let's see. Page 8, line 1, this is just going to be that language for the distribution of the 20% tax and how that money will be distributed to the various localities. Page 8 on line 24, and then onto the next page, that's just your penalties. Again, no changes there. Page 9 and then onto page 10, this is just the kind of cleanup to make sure that, one, we're now dealing with statute, so we can get rid of the reference to just pursuant to law, which is a little bit more vague in general. And then the cleanup to the definition of skill-based amusement game to make it consistent with what was in Wyoming session law. Of note, on line 10, beginning on page or line 13, this does differ from the bill that this would be a substitute for. It's really just a cleanup that under 719-106, which is the criminal history background checks that are authorized for various agencies, commissions, boards in the state. The Gaming Commission was not listed. It was kind of listed in other statutes that really weren't consistent with how, I would say generally, we provide that authority. The legislature provides that authority to various entities. So this would just add the Gaming Commission to that, what is now a somewhat lengthy list of agencies, boards, and commissions that have access to criminal history information. Line 21 on page 10 on to the next page. This is just basically the kind of flip side of the coin of the criminal history background checks and speaks to the idea of needing to provide fingerprints when it comes to the applicants under skill-based amusement games. Page 11, line 10. This is adding the authorized law enforcement personnel of the Gaming Commission into the retirement account under Title IX. As you can see, there are a number of types of law enforcement that fall under the retirement provisions, and this was a request of the Gaming Commission to have their law enforcement personnel also be able to take advantage of that access to that account or that opportunity. Beginning on page 12, these are just the housekeeping because we're moving provisions to a new article. So that's going to be line 12 on to line 13. Thing to note on line 13, or excuse me, page 13, line 17, is this is the definition of manufacturer in what it comes to regulating that type of entity. This is what will drive that regulation. On to page 14, line 1, we now have a definition in this bill of what skill means. Skill means a player's knowledge, dexterity, or any other ability or expertise relevant to gameplay. And then the definition of skill-based amusement game requiring that strategy and skill be a primary factor. Moving to line 15, this is a more kind of housekeeping in the area of criminal history record information. This is just clarifying that the commission is authorized to access that criminal history information under Title 11 for manufacturers, which is of note, operators and establishments. So this would allow the commission to run a criminal history background check on the operators and establishments, but also the manufacturers. And whether or not how you run a criminal history background check on a manufacturer is worth consideration by the committee. Moving on to page 15, those are just cleanup provisions. Again, onto the beginning part of 16 and cleanup for that, actually all of page 16. Page 17, more of the same. And then, Madam Chairman, that is basically the bill. And I'd stand for any questions.
Questions from the committee? For John? Seeing none. I know we was hoping to kind of work those two in tandem. I think we heard relevant testimony from the public on the first bill, but if there's anyone from the public that wants to comment specifically on this bill, though I think we covered a lot of the issues about manufacturers and some of the other items, but I'll give you a second to jump back on if you want to make a comment. So senators, going forward, I think that we can either move forward with the more comprehensive bill that provides some more correction, or we could just move forward with the bill that more or less repeals the sunset. My preference would be to work the substitute that takes a larger bite out of trying to address more of the issues, which is 56. So I'd entertain that motion. I think for the purposes of today, I'd like to leave one bill behind and just advance one bill for now. Mr. Brody?
Madam Chairman, thank you. And I forgot to mention one thing that's probably worth note. If you look on page 8, beginning on line 6, this provision has to do with how the taxes are remitted by the operators. This requires that an operator or manufacturer, and this goes to the comment you made earlier, the operator or a manufacturer will be remitting these taxes. It also allows for the ability for you to prepay your taxes if you're an operator or manufacturer. So that is a notable change from the current law.
Thank you, John. Any questions? Okay, and I haven't seen anyone in the public that's any attendees that are trying to come in. I'm looking at you now. Raise your hand if you'd like to make any comments. All righty, with that, Senator Landon, I think you're going to make a motion.
Madam Chairman, I would move Senate File 56 for our consideration today.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Schuler. Discussion, Senator Guru.
Just a procedural question. I want to make sure we're moving the substitute bill forward. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator Gru, I think what I'd like to do is we've moved Senate File 56, and now we have a motion for the substitute.
Just want to make sure.
Thank you. Would anyone like to move that we take up the substitute bill for Senate File 56? This substitute would move it from being session law to permanent in the Green Book's codified law. I think Senator Gru's got his hand up.
So moved.
And then Senator Landon.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Before we start working this bill, is there any discussion that any committee member would like to make or any comments? Okay, well, let's go ahead and go page by page. Looking at the substitute, page number 1. Or we could also tackle this a little bit more conceptually. And I may do that, committee members. Going on to page 2. Any changes? Going on to page 3. Committee members, I would move that we strike manufacturers from regulation at this time. The manufacturers of these machines have an interest in ensuring that they're playable and complying with Wyoming law. But I think when we start trying to regulate wherever these machines are being produced, it starts getting really confusing, and we don't do that with any other industry. Ultimately, my position is that if an operator is bringing them into Wyoming, it's the operator's duty to ensure that they're complying with Wyoming law. And to the extent that there's a problem between the operator and the manufacturer, that they settle that like other business parties and entities do in private litigation or other means of resolving their disputes. So from that perspective, I think that some of the issues that we heard about reports being submitted, the lab tests, I think those get smoothed out over time once the commission has an established schedule, once some of the regulatory hurdles are smoothed out. But at this time, I don't see the need to try and regulate what's happening in other states. So on page 3, line 20, there's a reference to manufacturers. And on page 4, I would, so along those lines, I'll just kind of move through the bill, but they're all dealing with manufacturer, and I'd ask LSO if I missed one reference to help me flag it. But on page 4, line 3, this is the submission of the nationally recognized lab report. That is, in my view, an operator's responsibility, not a manufacturer's. So on line 3, I would change the word manufacturer to operator. And then going on to page 7, lines 5 through 7, delete subsection or paragraph C. Going on to page 8, deleting on page line 3 and 4, or manufacturer. And then on line 7, delete the words by the operator or, and then on to line 8, manufacturer. So we've heard testimony that some operators want to prepay, and I think that that's fine. The commission can identify rules to do that. So this line would read, the taxes imposed under this section may be prepaid as provided by rule of the commission. And that makes it cleaner so that if the commission, if there's a default on taxes, the commission knows that they go to the operator. And if the operator wants to say that that was the manufacturer's fault for some reason, then they can decide that in their own private way. And then going on through the bill, I think there was only a few other references to manufacturer. Page 13, lines 17 through 19. And then again on page 14, which authorizes the commission to access criminal history information. When you have an operator in Wyoming, it's real easy to identify who those folks are. I think when it comes to manufacturer, that gets a little bit unclear. Are we trying to get criminal background checks on the receptionist that works for the manufacturing company, or, it's just very unclear how we're going to do that. So at this time, I think we should probably give that more thought. And so with that, that would be my motion, is to remove the manufacturing reference or attempt to regulate from this bill. Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Landon.
Madam Chairman, I'll second it, but I do think that this merits a little bit of discussion. So thank you, Madam Chairman. That was a quick run through, and I think I followed all the way through the bill and where this is going to hit. For some reason, and admittedly, I'm just getting up to speed here. Those of us who are new to the committee have not sat through many of the discussions that took place during the interim, but there's a piece of me that is a little cautionary on this front, simply because I want to make sure that our commission has the opportunity to maybe shut the door. If we've got a manufacturer out there that has gotten several of our operators in hot water, for example, are we going to eliminate any ability for us to shut the door on that manufacturer, for example? That's just one thought that I have. The other thought is we're asking our operators to step up and understand a pretty complicated situation when we say, it's up to you to assure that that machine is doing what it said, what our laws restrict it to do. If I'm an operator, am I really gonna be able by myself to sign with certainty that that machine is doing what it's supposed to? So I don't know. I'm struggling to get there a little bit. So maybe it's just me.
No, Senator Landon, good questions. Any other comments or thoughts by fellow committee members? Senator Guru.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I kind of go along with my good friend from Turner County. I agree with going through the bill. I agree with I think some of your motion has merit. Then I worry a little bit about some other pieces. Let me give you an example as you run through. Like I said, I agree with you. I don't think that the manufacturer should be on the hook for paying the taxes that the operator is supposed to pay. I'm with you there. But going on to some of the others, I still worry about the same thing that Senator Landon was speaking of. I want to make sure that we're not leaving the barn door open on the manufacturer side. And I guess maybe the best way to and I know we've closed public comment, but I don't know if the chairman of the gaming commission, if you'd allow him just to say would your motion be able to have the commission keep that laser focus that they're looking on? And that would help me a little bit understand. And I don't want to, open public comment back up, but if it's acceptable to chair, that would help me a bit.
Sure, I think that that's appropriate. And, we're all new committee members. We didn't work this well in the interim. So I think having some flexibility and making sure we understand what's going on is helpful. So Director Moore, if you're still in the attendee room, if we could add you back in to address Senator Gru's comment. I'm just looking to see if you're there. You're back in. And I think you just need to unmute. Welcome back.
Thank you. Chairman Ellis, Senator Guru, to answer your question, across most all jurisdictions, the manufacturers are licensed. It is very consistent that manufacturers are licensed. And to the extent the Gaming Commission could develop rules for covering that and exactly what that threshold is for that licensure. I think that whether it's in statute, then obviously it's required, or doing it via rulemaking. I think we have the authority to add that in rules as the bill is currently, to where we could do that. And I don't know if the heartburn maybe here is the dollar amount of the license, or if it's the idea of licensing, and maybe there's some flexibility there too.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mine is just a conceptual one, and I'll go back to the coal mining example. When the state of Wyoming issues a coal permit, we have certain requirements on what, they're allowed to put in the atmosphere, oil and gas or water. I mean, they get permitted for that. And if there's a malfunction in the equipment that they use, we don't go after the manufacturer. We tell the operator, you're in violation of your permit. You're not complying. And so then the operator can say, well, I bought bad equipment. And then they go sue the manufacturer for giving them bad equipment. And so that's my kind of thinking in this is the state of Wyoming should be working with the operators. And, maybe that's a way of narrowing it as operators. You're only allowed to purchase or rent machines from licensed manufacturers. Like, that's a fair requirement, but that's not us regulating what a manufacturer out of state is doing. So it's not so much the heartburn over the fee that we're charging, it's that we have a fee at all and how that works. Because at the end of the day, our hooks are on the people who are bringing these machines into Wyoming. And to Senator Landon's point, these games, if they're not regulated adequately, invite criminal elements. And I think everyone's very aware of that and the history of that. And so this is a big deal. Like, this isn't something you loosey-goosey go buy a machine and just throw it in your business because you think it'll help your revenue. This is a serious endeavor, which we've got to take seriously and regulate seriously. So to my point, that's why we need to really make sure that those operators know that this is serious and they need to be willing to put their name on it. So maybe that's another way to get after this, is requiring that operators can only bring in machines that were constructed by licensed manufacturers. So I think that's a probably more appropriate way, but I don't have language on where that would go in here right now. But I don't like this notion that, who's going to pay the tax? Well, either the operator or the manufacturer. No, the operator. That's their business. They brought it to Wyoming. Director Moore.
Yes, and thank you, Chairman Ellis. I do understand that completely. I agree 100%. We deal with the permittees, the licensees, and if a tax isn't being paid, if sudden, that's who we go after. That's who we would be going after. And again, in the world, in the historic racing side of the house, the manufacturers are licensed. We license those. It's a nominal fee, but they are licensed, and we and they can't just bring in any games. It's specific, and they go through quite an extensive licensing process and review process. So in the you know, in the gaming world, a little different. You have vendors that have been approved by the commissions in most all jurisdictions, and the vendors can say, okay, well, you have this one, this one, this one, and I'm going to take 2 from this one, 3 from this guy, and 4 from here, whatever. So I think there's merit to everything here.
And then, Mr. Moore, I think that's another great idea, is rather than trying to regulate beyond our borders of Wyoming, it's the commission shall develop a list of approved vendors. Like that's another tool. So I'm going to leave this motion in as it is right now, but happy to work on another amendment that would give you more tools that are kind of better aligned with the scope of your power, that either require an operator to purchase from an approved vendor list or from a licensed manufacturer. Senator Grew.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Moore, I guess then, so what I'm hearing you say, and I won't put words in your mouth here and just see, wouldn't you agree that with this motion and taking out the manufacturer language in rules, the board will be able to get to where it needs to get to regulate as they see necessary, who an operator should be dealing with and maybe who the operator shouldn't be dealing with. And so that's not going to be something that's going to impede that. And also help you keep to your mission. Is that correct?
Yes, Chairman Ellis, Senator Grew, yes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Moore. And Chairman Ellis, thank you, or Chairwoman Ellis, I'm sorry. Thank you very much for actually going through that. That helped me a lot with some of my concerns.
Thank you, thank you, Senator Grew. Senator Landon.
Madam Chairman, I agree with the senator from Teton County. That really helped me to get where I needed to go to, I believe. My concern was simply that the commission not be left without the ability to at least keep an eye on these manufacturers and you know, spot trends that might be going down the wrong road or whatever. And so I think your approach is good. We can take care of the amendment, but then we can see if there isn't some return of language that might be helpful to the commission. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the amendment? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one question when we were going through them. On page 7, we didn't take out on section C, the manufacturers there on that particular part, did we? Because, you know, I think that payment that they have to make, that initial fee, would need to stay in there. I just wanted to follow through with that. I tried to stay up with all of the additions and the deletions, but could you kind of clarify that for me?
My motion, Senator Schuler, was to remove paragraph C.
To remove that paragraph. Okay.
From what I understand, in visiting with some folks in industry, there are some states that try and go after the manufacturers. I just feel like this is a very odd structure. Like, having served on the revenue committee, I can't think of any other area where we say, if you're going to buy a product and bring it into Wyoming, we're going to charge whoever built your product. Cars, trucks, contracting equipment, oil and gas equipment. I don't like that concept. But Mr. Brody from LSO had something to say.
Madam Chairman, just in line with what Director Moore stated, and as far as administrative rules being available to the commission, I think the committee may want to consider whether they should further amend subsection C on page 3. If we simply eliminate manufacturers, then we're creating what essentially is going to be an exclusive list of what the provisions for the control, supervision, direction, discipline, etc. can apply to. So a possible solution would just be to the suspension or fining of any person for a violation of this article. And I don't know if that's appropriate now, but given the sense of conversation, I thought it was worth noting.
How about I would amend, as I would take that as a suggestion, and I would offer a friendly amendment to my amendment. So on page 3, line 20, delete manufacturers, operators, and establishments, and just insert any person Bill, I believe you were the second on that. Are you comfortable with that as a friendly amendment? Okay. All righty, further discussion on the amendment to remove manufacturers from this substitute bill. All those in favor, please raise your hand. There are 5 hands up. All those opposed, please put your hand up. There are 0 hands, so the amendment passes 5-0. And just asking for a little grace, we may have missed some other references in there throughout the bill. So if we catch those, we'll make sure to highlight them. Is there any further discussion or further amendments on this bill? I'm happy to go through it page by page again. And Senator Landon, I don't know if you or Senator Guru, if you wanted to offer anything at this time or noodle on it a bit before it hits the floor. Senator Landon.
Madam Chair, I do think that there's probably some room to continue to ponder this bill and make sure we land it in the best spot possible for Director Moore, all of his people, and for our comfort as well. I guess today I'm just on the fly. I'm not quite ready to do that unless we want to try. But I think there is some room maybe for us to work this when it gets to the floor or whatever. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Landon. I agree with you. I think that we could, give them some more tools to make it clear. But I don't want to do it on the fly today. So to those watching this meeting and listening in, if you have any thoughts that you'd like to work with, please know Senator Landon and I are all ears to better refine. So any comments
Madam Chair, sorry, just to add to what you're saying, I do think I just want to make sure, particularly on this manufacturer front, that we are allowing our commission to do what it needs to do, plus the licensing piece that we talked about. I want to make sure that we're in the right spot there. I really commend the work. This is an area of the world, you and I were talking before the meeting, that it dates back several years to my days on the Appropriations Committee when this began to rear its head as a potential problem. We had all of these machines arriving in Wyoming and we really had no oversight. So I really commend the work and I'm glad we are this far down the road with it. But I just want to make sure that when we get to the floor, we want to make sure we end up with the best product possible. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Senator Guru.
I too want to, amplify, just say what my friend from Toronto County is saying. I think there is a little bit of tweaking maybe we could do with this. And I'm going to come clean at this point. In Montana, I have what they call a route operator's license. I operate these machines and actually can lease them out. And when I first started, I was really excited. I was going up to Montana my first time when I had these machines. And I kind of had this thought in my head as I was driving that I was Robert De Niro in Casino. And I was driving up and I was going to have these nicely colored suits and was going to make all this money and talk to my buddies in Vegas like Steve Wynn and say, hey, buddy, can I get a comp from you? Anytime you're up in Missoula, you can gamble on me. When I got up there, I talked to my manager and said, how are we doing? He goes, well, you lost $2,000 today. And I said, wow, every time I go to Las Vegas, I lose. And now I own machines and I lose. And what's that all about? So that was my introduction into the gambling business. And so over the years, I've learned about how many machines you need to have to make things work, how much play per machine gets optimal performance and all these different things. And I can tell you right now, I have no problem voting this bill because I'll never own one of these in Wyoming. No, I have no interest in doing it. Don't even like the ones I have in Montana, to be honest, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot. People think you just plug that sucker in and start making money, and that ain't the way it works at all. You have to really know what you're doing, and it's a skill game to make that work and make it pay. So believe me, when those operators, they learn that pretty quickly. So it's a tough business and it needs to be regulated, and it really does. And I think this bill gets us there. I feel a lot of confidence in our gaming commission, and I think we can work with this to make it better. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gru. Are there any other amendments to the bill? I have one more I caught in my late night reading. Page 5. line 15, after the semicolon, we need the word and. And to explain that, is there a second to my motion? Senator Grew, seconded. So if you go back to page 4, this is what the lab report is supposed to include. And so there's a list of Romanet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so this makes it clear that all of these factors have to be discussed in the report, not just one. Right now, it was an open-ended list. We didn't even have an and or an or. So I think we should have that full discussion with an and. So all those in favor of adding the word and, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The amendment passes 5-0. Any other additional amendments on this bill at this time? Seeing none, we'll call the question. Can we get a roll call from LSO?
All right.
Madam Chair?
Brody?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think process-wise, the committee would need to vote on the substitute as an amendment and then vote on the bill with a roll call.
You're right, Mr. Brody. I skipped one step in there. All those in favor on the substitute bill as amended, please raise your hand. 5 hands up. All those opposed, please raise your hand. There are 0 hands up. The substitute passes 5-0. Any other discussion on the bill? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Senator Grew,
At,
Senator Landon,
Aye.
Senator Salzer,
Aye.
Senator Schuler,
Aye.
Chairwoman Ellis.
Committee, unless there's a burning desire by one of you to take this on to the floor, I'm happy to do it. But if anyone wants that esteemed honor.
Madam Chairman, we're right behind you if a fight breaks out.
All righty.
We've got your back.
we're there
So-
for.
Yeah, we'll leave the other bill behind for today. And if something happens with this particular piece of legislation, we can always revisit the other bill down the road going forward. Senator Guru.
Just a question on 55. Would there be any advantage? And I'm asking, this is another, actually, this is a new guy question on another front, but would there be any advantage to go ahead and adopting the substitute on 55 now? So we're ready for that if we need it, or does it really not matter? Because if it does, I'd make that motion.
Committee, I'm open to discussion. I don't know that it matters a whole bunch. If we pick it up later, we can quickly and move forward with adopting the substitute.
Okay.
But since we're not advancing it, maybe we never need to. So I think we're in good shape right now. Okay, committee. Well, thank you. This was our first meeting. Really excited about working with all of you. And thank you to those who participated from the public. And we'll go from there. Have a great day, everyone.